Alright, wrap-up time for Curious Tutelage in Standard. So, this deck, in our videos, we went 3-2, which isn't bad. I played a couple more matches for fun, and overall the record is right around 50%, which is not great. So, I love Sphinx's Tutelage, but I got some questions about this deck. There's a few questions. First off, when I first saw this deck, I was excited by the backup plan of flipping a Curious Homunculus, getting Bedlam Reveler for these big prowess creatures, and winning with damage. But in practice, it didn't really work out that way. In practice, we actually sideboarded out Homunculus a lot. It's just doesn't feel that good in this deck because a lot of our stuff is already cheap. Fiery Impulse, 1 mana. Lightning Axe, 1 mana. Fiery Temper, when we Madness it, 1 mana. So adding the mana doesn't really do that much for us. So that was kind of a frustration, and it never felt like we had enough damage to really play that game. It seemed when we did try to go on that plan, because we didn't have any other options, we didn't seem to get particularly close to actually doing it. So that part of the deck was a little bit disappointing, and as a result of playing the Curious Homunculus plan, the deck felt like it just didn't have enough card draw. When I think of a tutelage deck, I think of sticking tutelage and drawing as many cards as possible. In the old days, with tutelage, the two cards you would almost always see were Magnetic Insight to go along with the Tormenting Voice for just tons of ways to cycle through your deck, triggering your Sphinx's Tutelage and winning that way. So I felt like we were lacking in card draw. I felt like we were getting pulled multiple directions, which made the deck not as good as it could be. I think if you want to be a blue-red prowess deck, you can be a good blue-red prowess deck. You take out the Sphinx's Tutelages, you take out the Startled Awakes, and you play some Stormchaser Mages and maybe some Abbot of Carol Keeps, and be a legitimate prowess beatdown deck. Curious Homunculus could be awesome in that shell, and Bedlam Reveler is also very good. On the other hand, if you want to be a tutelage deck, you gotta really focus on drawing cards, and you probably take out Curious Homunculus, maybe the Kozilek's Return, which was also not impressive. There were so many times the Kozilek's Return where I felt like it would have been awesome if we could have got it back from our graveyard, but we don't have a single way to get it back from our graveyard. It seems like there were just some glaring omissions. There was no Collective Defiance, which is a way to get a ton of tutelage triggers, because you get to discard your hand, draw that many cards. There was no Fevered Visions, which is a repeatable tutelage trigger. So I just feel like this deck was getting pulled too many directions to be good. I think the Curious Homunculus idea is sweet, and I liked it on paper, but actually playing the deck, I did not like the Curious Homunculus package. Bedlam Reveler was pretty good in some situations, just for the 3 tutelage triggers, but if we're just looking for tutelage triggers, maybe Collective Defiance or something would even be better. So I don't know. Startled Awake did steal us some games, and we did manage to mill some people out. And one of the things I liked about the deck is we kind of get a head start against a lot of decks in the current standard format, because everyone is playing Grapple with the Past and Vessel of Nascency and all this stuff to fill their graveyard for Delirium. So it's kind of like we're starting with a free Startled Awake, like Leyline of Startled Awake, that we cast on turn 1, because our opponent's milling so many cards, so instead of having to mill 53 cards from our opponent's deck, we gotta mill 30-something cards from our opponent's deck, which means that Startled Awake actually is a pretty big chunk in those matchups where opponents are intentionally milling themselves. So I think there's a way to make tutelage work. I'm just not convinced that this is the way. My overall advice would be, if you want to keep playing this deck, get rid of the Homunculus and be a real tutelage deck with more card draw. There were so many times where our hand would just be cluttered with burn and creatures, and we wouldn't be able to trigger our tutelage often enough. And if you want to be a Curious Homunculus deck, really focus on the beatdown plan and kind of be aggro. There are ways you can flip Homunculus really quickly, like on turn 3, playing some of these burn spells, Magnetic Insights, the Tormenting Voices. So I think both halves of the deck are good and have potential to be good. I just don't like how they work together. So as much as I love tutelage, this deck was kind of because of the Curious Homunculus. Anyway, that's been our Much Abrew About Nothing for this week. Make sure to vote for next week's deck by liking, subscribing, and commenting to Instant Deck Tech videos. Anyway, thanks very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I will talk to you soon.